Let's talk about this single biggest reason why so many smart companies end up failing. It's because they don't actually understand what's controlling their costs. By the end of this quick explainer, you will. And I promise, the answer is way simpler and a lot more powerful than you might think. So it all boils down to this one question, right? We see this happen all the time. You have these brilliant companies, they've got amazing products, and then suddenly they're losing money or they're making cuts in all the wrong places. How on earth does that happen? Well, the answer is kind of shockingly simple, but it's also incredibly important. They're looking at the effect, the high cost, but they never actually understand the cause. They're just treating the symptom, not the actual disease.
This quote right here, this is the key to everything. Think about it like this. You don't control the temperature in a room by yelling at the thermometer, do you? No, you adjust the thermostat, the thing that causes the temperature to change. Costs work the exact same way. You can't just will a cost to go down, you have to control the activity that's pushing it up.
So, what is this thermostat? In business, we call it a cost driver. It's the root cause. It's a direct, predictable cause and effect relationship. When the driver happens, the cost goes up. Simple as that. If you can find the driver, you can control the cost.
Okay, so let's move away from theory and see how this actually works in the real world. We're going to look at 4 totally different companies and find the specific thermostat that controls their biggest costs.
We'll start with one we all know, Amazon. Just picture one of those massive fulfillment centers. One of their absolute biggest costs is the labor for picking and packing all of our orders. So what's the thermostat for that cost?
Now, the simple and wrong view is that labor cost is just driven by the number of employees they have. But that's a symptom, not the cause. The real driver, the activity, is the number of orders processed. Just think about it. When orders go crazy during the holidays, what does Amazon do? They hire 250,000 seasonal workers. The orders are the cause, the hiring is the effect. This is a perfect example of a volume-based driver.
All right, let's switch gears and look at a service business, maybe a bank's call center. Their big cost is, of course, customer service. What do you think drives that?
The trap here is to think the cost is driven by the total number of customers, but that's just wrong. One really high-maintenance customer who calls you every single day costs way more than 100 quiet customers who never call at all. The true driver isn't having the customers, it's the activity of serving them. The driver is the number of service requests handled. That's a transaction driver.
Okay, let's get a little more complex here with Boeing. They have this massive overhead cost they call engineering support. I mean, what could possibly drive a cost that huge and complicated?
And this is just a brilliant illustration of a key point. The simple view might be to just take that huge cost and divide it by the number of planes they built. But not all planes are created equal. A standard plane might have, say, 20 engineering changes, but a super customized plane for a specific airline might have 2,000. That second plane is what's really running up the bill. The driver here is complexity, and we measure it by the number of engineering change orders.
And for our last example, let's look at a business where the product is completely invisible, a top law firm. Their biggest cost? The salaries of their very highly paid lawyers. So what drives that? Well, it's the one resource they can never, ever get more of: time. The real driver is the number of billable hours they spend on a case. For pretty much any business that sells expertise, time is almost always the thermostat.
So we've seen the concept in action. We get it. But how do we turn this intuition into a tool we can actually use for, budgeting and forecasting?
Well, we do it with a really simple but powerful formula.
This right here is the cost function, and it's basically the mathematical heart of this entire idea. Everything we've been talking about really just boils down to this one equation: y equals a plus b times x. It looks simple, I know, but it gives us some serious predictive power.
Let's break this down real quick. Y is the total cost we're trying to predict. That's the temperature in the room. A is your fixed cost. Think of it as your baseline, the stuff that doesn't change, like your monthly rent. B is your variable rate. That's how much each little activity costs. And X? Well, X is the star of the show. That's the cost driver, the thermostat, the activity, the cause that we've been looking for.
Okay, so this is where it gets really practical. I mean, in the real world, you might have 3 or 4 different activities that could be the driver. So how do you know which one is the true thermostat?
You use data. Let's imagine a hospital wants to figure out its patient support costs. So they test 3 potential drivers. They run something called a regression analysis, and it gives them this value called R squared. Now, don't let the name scare you. R-squared is just a score from 0 to 1 that tells you how well the driver predicts the cost. A higher score is better. That's all you need to know. And the rule is just dead simple. The driver with the highest R-squared wins. It's the best predictor because it has the strongest cause and effect link. In our hospital example, number of patient days had an R-squared of 0.89. That means it explains 89% of why the support costs go up and down. It is without a doubt the true thermostat.
Now that we have the tools, let's look at where people really get this wrong. These are the classic mistakes, the exam traps that confuse things that happen at the same time with things that actually cause each other.
So here's a common scenario for you. A manager sees that when their labor costs go up, the utility bill also goes up. So it seems logical that labor cost is the driver for utilities, right?
Absolutely not. This is probably the single biggest mistake people make. It's confusing correlation with causation. Just because two things move together doesn't mean one causes the other.
Here's why. Does paying your workers a higher wage physically cause the lights to burn more electricity? Of course not. That's silly. What's really happening is there's a third, hidden factor, like machine hours, that's causing both costs to go up. More machine hours means you need more labor and you use more electricity. So here's the golden rule. Always prefer an activity, something you can count, like hours or setups, over a monetary amount as your driver.
So let's bring this all home. Why have we spent all this time on this? Because understanding cost drivers is what separates a bookkeeper from a true strategic partner to the business.
Look, the goal isn't just to record costs. It's to understand them. And by using cost drivers as your tool, you can go to management and tell them exactly how to control their costs. If you look back at our formula, y equals a plus bx, there are only two ways. You can either get more efficient, which lowers b, the cost per activity, or you can strategically reduce the level of the activity itself, which is x. That's not just numbers, that's actionable intelligence.
So I want to end with this. Mindlessly cutting a budget is like seeing a fever on a thermometer and just smashing the thermometer, hoping the problem goes away. But managing cost drivers, that's like understanding what's causing the fever and giving the right medicine. One treats the symptom, the other cures the disease. And that is the difference between a bookkeeper and a strategist.